Welcome, everybody, to the Ladies Talk Show. This is your host, Leah Richeimer. Thank you very much for being here. We are actually today doing a special session for facilitator training. Now, I'll explain to you what a facilitator is. We have this book, Marriage Secrets, and what that does is it gives over chapter by chapter, page by page, exactly what our tradition is for having an extraordinary marriage. And extraordinary, I mean more happiness for the wife, more joy, more satisfaction, more fulfillment and meaning in her life. Okay. And for the husband and for the children, for the whole world. If we can strengthen marriages, we can strengthen the world. This book can be read by one person, just sitting an afternoon, read the book, fine. But where the power of learning takes place the most powerfully is in a group setting given over by a teacher. So the way that I designed this book is not just for individuals to read, and everybody learns differently. So reading it themselves gets you somewhere, gets you some power, and gets you, hopefully, God willing, it'll increase your joy and satisfaction in life. But it's also written as a complete curriculum for teachers to teach. It will teach the teachers how to give over the material. Any good teacher or a psychologist or Rebbitzin, anybody who's ever sat with anybody and given something over, this is the easiest curriculum to go through. All you need to do is you take the book, you gather the people, and I'm going to go into this in detail, and for 1 hour of your life, you have the opportunity to create extraordinary marriages in the people in the room with you. So here's the logistics behind how the whole thing works. So first of all, I want to start with a very interesting question that was asked to Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon in Lakewood. And they went to him and they said to the rabbi, they said, listen, thousands of years ago, all of the leaders of our generation were shepherds, right? You had Moshe was a shepherd, Yaakov Avinu was a shepherd. David HaMelech was a shepherd. Even Rachel was a shepherd because her Lavan didn't have any sons. All of the leaders of the generation of the Jewish people were all shepherds. We don't tend sheep anymore. Who are going to be the leaders of this generation? And you want to know what his answer was? Camp counselors. The camp counselors are going to be the ones who are going to be the leaders of our generation. So what does that have to do with being a facilitator? It has to do with the fact that what a camp counselor did is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu did. He goes out, he's tending thousands and thousands of sheep. One little sheep wandered off, and he went and put the sheep on his shoulders and walked with that sheep who was tired and hungry. He cared about the overall group, and he cared about the individual. And as facilitators for a marriage secret study group, what you have the potential to do is to be at the forefront, the cutting edge of bringing our nation and the rest of the world to the next level in terms of closeness in their relationships. That's an awesome responsibility. But the beautiful thing is, there's no work to do it. It's all been laid out for you. All you have to do is show up. That's it. And you can really make an extraordinary difference in the world. The first thing you do is pick a day and a time that works for you. That, like, for instance, you don't have to make yourself crazy. If Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon happens to be the one pocket of time that you have, then that's where you make your group. You only need 5, 10, 15, 20 people to come. So whatever time, there'll be somebody, hopefully, who can make at that time. So you pick the date and time. So let's say it's Wednesday nights at 7:30. Fine. You find somebody and you say, listen, would you like to host a group 7:30 on Wednesday nights on Shalom Bayis, on Peace in the Home? And they say, oh, I'd love to. Fine. They do all the work. They make the phone calls. They set up the group, how they're going to communicate, emails or texting or WhatsApp, whatever it is, whatever is the easiest for them to do. They set that up. They call the people. They get the RSVPs. If they want to put out a little water, a little nuts, a little spritzer water, something like that, that's fine. Most people don't serve a whole lot when they're doing that. They say the cookies don't get touched by the ladies anyhow. And that person hosts it. Now, I do have many people who have become facilitators. There's two ladies in Eretz Israel who are doing it, who actually host it themselves. They also charge for it. Whatever people do, if people can make money out of it, good, that's fantastic. But it's not a requirement. And I think for the most part, people are we're just getting started. So we have about a dozen people. I think there's 14 groups going now. So the other people aren't charging for it, but the people are hosting it themselves. Most people get a friend to host it. It's just too much for one person to do both. But if you've got the energy, that's wonderful. Fine. Your hosts the people. It's Wednesday at 7:30. Fine. You show up at 7:25. You take the book, right? This is the book, and you hand it. You're sitting there, welcome everybody, whatever. You first start with the guidelines. In the back of the book, it's, the first thing you do, the very first class, is you read study group guidelines. And this covers everything. And anybody who joins the group should read this before they join. And it just says, no gossiping about your husband, no talking about your husband, no saying bad things about your husband. It talks about how to be confidential and not to tell other people, not only what is said in the group, but that the people are in the group. If you run into, my students, I always say, look, if you run into somebody else in the group and in the market, instead of saying, hi, oh yeah, how do you know each other? Oh, from the Marriage Secret Study Group. Some people don't want it. We're aiming to change that. We're aiming to make it so that it's popular and it's people are proud to work on Shalom Bayis. In those guidelines, it explains everything that needs to happen in the group. Fine. That's the first maybe 10 minutes of the first class. And that's it. You don't have to go through the guidelines again unless you see everybody's not listening to them. Then what you do, you take the book and you hand it to the first person, and it goes around from person to person to person. So let's say there's 6 people in your group. Each person will read one section of that group. Now, the way the book is designed, again, this is designed as a curriculum to be taught and to be read alone. But you'll see there's a heading on. Yeah, here's a heading, and then it goes to the next heading. So typically, it goes around the room and people read from heading to heading. That's it. Or if people want to do one page, or if people want to read a whole chapter, whatever you decide with your group is fine. But I usually find that it keeps them a lot more engaged if you can sort of daze off, then the book gets handed to you and it's your turn. Guess what? You're going to start paying attention. So that's how it's gone. Now, it's not a straight shot from there to the end of the hour, okay? Somebody will say something like, you must, inside the book are 220 sources. So in those 220 sources, there's a quote from the Rambam that says, you must respect your husband exceedingly. So somebody in the group is going to read, I've taught this many times for over the course of the last 7 years, someone's going to read that, and everybody else is going to cross their arms and say, oh my, when he respects me, I'll respect him, right? Okay, so fine. Then it becomes a free-for-all, and everybody's talking about, well, I've thought this, and I felt this, and, I don't understand, and how can Leah say that, and how can Chazal say that, and how can, it becomes a big discussion. As the group facilitator, your job is to referee and coordinate and make sure everybody, nobody's saying anything mean or getting hostile. It's never in all these years gotten hostile. I don't think you have to worry about that. But your job as the facilitator is to sort of just like a teacher would, just rein it in and maybe put your own 2 comments. I start this by saying that people don't need to have wisdom to share, because I don't want the facilitators to feel like they have to add something to the pot, that it's all in there. Everything that is our Masorah, everything that is sourced is already in the book. But if you want to say how a story, let's say respect, the one I just gave, Rambam, respect your husband exceedingly, you want to say, that was very hard for me when I first got married, but over time I learned and I worked on it, or boy, that's still hard for me, whatever it is. If you want to share stories, anecdotes, part of your life wisdom, you can definitely add to it. It's desired. People will cleave to you from your sharing yourself with them, but it's not necessary. Everything is already in here. So basically what you're doing is it's going around from person to person, reading the sections. Then there's lots of discussions. Again, you're making sure that there is no gossip about their husbands. And if someone starts gossip, the way I wrote those guidelines is so that as people read the guidelines, they'll feel bad if they break the guidelines. In other words, you can either have somebody say, oh, well, my husband leaves his socks on the pillow, But if everybody in the room has sort of like an agreement at the beginning when they read the guidelines, that if someone's talking lashon hara, if someone's gossiping, to stop them. When someone says, "Oh, my husband leaves his socks on the on the floor all the time," the other people say, "Oh, sorry, I don't think that we're supposed to talk about our husbands." And everybody will say, "Oh, yeah. If it's done nicely." That again, the facilitator is kind of the lashon hara police. She's the one who's stopping the gossip. And when I spoke with Rebbetzin Kamenetsky, who gave a big bracha for our Hatzlacha here, so did her husband Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. But when Rebbetzin Kamenetsky said to me, she said, the facilitators, it's such a crucial thing. We're in such a crisis with shalom bayis this day and age. We need this so desperately in our world today that it has to happen. We need to increase the facilitators. We need to increase these groups. But it's the job of the facilitator to make sure that nobody's talking poorly of their husbands. And so what you have to keep in mind, you are, especially in the beginning, you're going to be the gossip police. And it's not that hard. People right away will go, "Oh, okay." I just wanted to make that clear. And then eventually the whole group chimes in like, "Oh, don't say that," And if someone starts to say, "Well, my husband," you'll see the other people in the class go, "Shh, wait, is it gossip you're about to speak?" Oh, like that. That's very crucial, obviously, to keep the whole thing beautiful. So anyway, you go around the room, everybody reads their little portion, everybody discusses it, and then at the end, here's the easy bit. That's it. That's the whole class. That's it. Now you can go home now. That's all you have to do. But I'll continue, and I'm going to take questions in a minute. At the end, okay. So there's two at the end of each chapter. There is a little house like that. In the house are the homeworks for that week. So the facilitator reads through them. She can do it either before she gets to class or right then and there. It's fine. It's chilled. Okay. You pick one of these homeworks. So this one I'm just reading. Notice when you might be treating your husband like a vending machine. Stop and consider what you might really need and try to let go of one want. Okay, that'll be much more clear when you're in the middle of the book. But basically, the facilitator chooses one of the homeworks, and there's usually 3 or 4 in every end of every chapter, and gives them for that week. Then the following week, here's the most extraordinary thing. Let's say the homework was to not interrupt your husband that week. Okay, and it's a little bit of a hard thing. Some people are like, "Oh my goodness, I interrupt him constantly. I never realized." So at the next week, at the beginning of class, say, "Okay, who wants to share from the homework?" And everybody in the beginning is reluctant and whatever. And then by the time things are going in about a month and everybody's familiar with each other, you're fighting them to, no, let her go first, okay? So sometimes, maybe it depends if you get a quiet group or what the mix of the group is. But in any case, so they'll say, you'll say, "Okay, let's share about the homework." So the first person will say, "I didn't realize how much I interrupted my husband." And another woman will say, I stopped interrupting him. And when I realized, I thought I knew what he was going to say. And by not interrupting him, he said something completely different. And I realized that I need to be a better listener. And then guess what? Not only did she learn that, but all the other ladies, the 6 other ladies sitting there, the 10 other ladies sitting there, are like, "Oh, wow," and has an insight that they didn't have before. It's very, very powerful. I mean, the women who've gone through this class would be some, and we finish and they said, "Can we start the book again?" So, and I've been teaching it 4 years. The profound, if you were to pull aside any one of these women and say, "Did this affect you in any way? Was it an enjoyable hour for you?" And they'll say, "It changed my life. Not just my focus of keeping shalom bayis right here, but the tools and the techniques that the Torah gave us." Okay, Leah compiled them, so yay on me, okay? But the Torah gave us these secrets. God designed us and he created us to know exactly what we need to be happy. And then he gave us his Masorah. He gave us our traditions of exactly how to make ourselves happy. It's all there, and yet we don't know it off the tip of our tongue. If you were to stop any woman in the market and say, "Hey, what's our Masorah for kashrus, for keeping kosher?" She's going to tell you, "Oh, well, you separate milk and meat, and she's going to give you all kinds of recipes." Fine. You need a hechsher. You ask her, "What's our Masorah for Shabbos?" "Oh, we light candles on Friday night. Oh, we make challah. We have cholent, blah, blah, blah." Fine. What is our Masorah for shalom bayis? What's our tradition for peace in the home? She's going to be like, I'll get back to you on that one. She doesn't have to get back on you. It's all here in one place. Okay, this is a book by Art Scroll. Rabbi Pesach Krohn wrote the foreword for it. I have Rabbi Shalom Kamenetsky wrote the Haskama. So did Rabbi Gershon Vest from Los Angeles wrote the Haskama for it. So it's been you got the hextures of the Art Scroll rabbis stamped all over it. This has been vetted. It is our Masorah. I don't claim to. The content is not my own. I did organize it. Okay, I'll take credit for organizing it, but it's your Masorah. It's your heritage. It's all of our heritage. And it is uncanny. If you stop one of my students who've been in for 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and you were to ask them, has this helped you at all? It changed my life. I'm not the same human being. I'm 10 times closer to my husband. I'm 10 times more satisfied. I'm 10 times happier. And that's because the person, the entity that created us also gave us the tools for how to have an extraordinary, joyous life. And it's all in our Masorah. We just have to get it out to the people. And please God, you are going to be part of making that happen. This is what a facilitator does. It is a little bit of logistics in the beginning of getting it started and getting the right host and, getting the time and the place and the whatever. But once it starts, I promise you one thing. You will be completely addicted to teaching this. And your students will be addicted to it. It's weird. People, it's like sticks like glue. It's like, there's people who come and go and, whatever, that's how life is. People are busy and people are stressed. And also sometimes maybe it's too hard. Maybe they're going through a rough patch in their marriage. And so working on it and they feel like, and then it's hard. And that's understandable. But I'm just saying there will be a dedicated group of people who want to go inside, want to learn it, want to grow. And you can make a profound difference for them. A lot of the facilitators have said that, when I've said, oh, you ought to be a facilitator, you'd be fantastic. Like, oh, I don't have time. Like, are you crazy? I've got a million things on my plate. I hear it. But here is the thing you have to know. This 1 hour of showing up has two things in it that nothing else you're doing does. Number one, well, not nothing. I shouldn't say it like that, but the one thing is it completely invigorates the rest of your life. You will find. Ask the other facilitators. You feel it like it puts a center point on your life. You're there. You're engaged. You're working with them. So whatever exhaustion you might feel, it's completely flips around and turns around because it's invigorating. I should know. I teach at Shabbos afternoon, and it's 3:00 in the afternoon. Everybody else is napping, and I'm marching off, and I'm okay. And then I get there, and it's like it's on fire, and I'm like, oh my gosh! I come home, I feel, how did class go? I'm like, it was amazing. It was unbelievable. It's always amazing. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, where in your life can you guarantee that this hour that you put in not only affects you, your family, your children, your grandchildren, but all of the women in the room, them, their marriages, their children, their grandchildren, their sisters, their cousins, the people that they have effect on in terms of getting our Masorah out there. We are a nation that has led the planet in terms of an aliyah, a closeness to making a difference in the world and closeness to God. And this is God's favorite, most precious thing is Shalom Bayis. And you have a hand in making that happen. Learning about this and knowing what a difference you could make. A lot of people come and say, I have a dream. I have so much to give. This is like a streamlined for you. You give and give, you share yourself, and you can contribute to the planet Earth. You, as the facilitator, decide when what's going on in the class is productive and when it's just carrying on with where it's not moving the action forward of the way it should be or the way you'd like it to be. If you like when people ask a lot of things and, the big back and forth, then your class will have more of that. If you like going inside more, your class will have that. So you pace it as you see fit. The typical, I would say, is about a half a chapter per class. There's 13 chapters. But I personally, I love to hear I feel like when people walk into a class, they come in, nobody's empty cup, right? They come in, they've got a full cup, right? So now they're listening to you, and they're listening to you, 10 things they already heard, belief systems that they've had forever, right? If they talk and open their mouth, they spill off a little bit of that, of what's going on with them. And now there's some room for some additional material to go in. So I feel like the more people talk in a class, the more can go in. Now that might not be how all teachers teach, or how they like, or how they hold, or what they would want to do. But that's what would be my take on it. So pace it as you like. But here's the other thing. There's enough homeworks at the end of the book where that little cute little house is. At the end, there's 3 or 4 houses. So if it takes you 3 classes to go through a chapter, sorry, not houses, 3 or 4 questions inside the house. This is, and it's called Try This at Home. So that it can go, so yeah, see, this one has 4, different homeworks for that week. As you go along, after chapter 1, 2, and 3, you almost can predict what the homework is going to be, because it's all very straightforward. If you're talking about communication, the homework's probably going to be about communication. So let's say you're doing the chapter on communication. Every time you start, someone reads 1 paragraph, and then everybody starts chiming in and arguing and yelling and saying, hey, let's do it like this. Let's do it like that. Oh, I think this and I think that, whatever, right? And it's taking you 7 sessions, 1-hour sessions to get through the book, to get through that chapter. By the time you get to like chapter 3 or 4, you really can make them up. Another thing I do, sometimes I give a homework, like let's say I give a homework to, see how to watch yourself when you are not taking care of yourself. Okay, so that's one of the homeworks in here, to really do something to take care of yourself. And they come back next week, and they all say, sorry, that was one thing I didn't do, one homework I didn't do. I don't do any of the homework. I found that was so hard for me. And everybody says, listen, Leah, you gave us the homework and it's Erev Pesach. I'm sorry, I could not go get my nails done, or whatever that is that people do for relaxation. Okay, if nobody did the homework, guess what? They're getting again then that week. Okay, so you can double up, you can change it, you tweak it, you make up your own homework. If you get stuck, just email me and I'll say, oh, here's another homework for that. You say, I'm going into class number, this is our 5th time on chapter 7. Okay, so even as long as I've been teaching it, I never ever hesitate, and anyone, you've seen me, I've never hesitate to say I don't know. That's above my pay scale. I don't know the answer to that. I will find out for you. I'll look into it. Or a lot of times I'll say, my gut feeling is that this is the answer. I'm not positive. I'll circle back next week. And then I make a note to myself, and I bring it back. The key is to not feel like you have to be a know-it-all. We don't know it all. And in fact, the more, being able to say, I'm not sure, or I don't know, is kind of a sense, then when you do say what you do say, it's like they trust more what you've said, because you've admitted that you're not perfect, or don't know all the answers. And also, I would tend to shy away from answering shilas. I mean, by teaching this, people are automatically going to assume, oh, you're the maven on shalom bayis and you're perfect at it, or whatever. And you should say, look, I'm just working on it, just like everybody else. I'm one of you, and here's the thing, my answer to it. Here's our Torah's answer to it, like that. But okay. Yeah. I have had people get upset at some of the topics, because it's very controversial to be saying a woman needs her man, like that. That's very postnish. That's very anti-American secular values or world values. So people do get their emotions rised up, and then we talk about it. We say, okay, does feeling like you don't need your husband, has that been working for you? Is that making you happy? Do you feel all satisfied, like your life is fulfilled by feeling like he's an appendage rather than something oxygen that you breathe? Look, by feeling like he's oxygen that you breathe, there's a level of closeness there you're not getting, that you're not getting right now. So I hear what you're saying. I'm not telling you to be any less powerful than you already are. No less powerful. But call a spade a spade. He needs you also, but women walk around, I don't need him. It's so sad. So That's a controversial issue. Everybody's emotions, everybody's triggered, everybody has something to say about it, and they discuss it. And then there's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs that flesh it out. So you don't necessarily have to address the emotions right then and there. And the other thing you have to understand is that I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a trained therapist, and nor do you have to be, okay? We have our Masorah, we have our traditions of what makes a good marriage, and that's what we're going by. But there are people who need psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, medication, that exists in our world. And you will likely be the first line of defense to discover that when someone walks in and you're like, boy, they could really use some help. It's, you don't have to feel the onus like, oh, how am I going to tell them? Because you tell someone they need therapy, they don't like you, so everything has to be handled very carefully. The way I've handled it in the past is if I felt that somebody really needed to go see, could be helped by it, they don't realize it. They just think they're suffering, and they don't realize that, just getting some therapy can really help them to cope with this situation, even if maybe the situation can't be perfect or fixed exactly as they'd want it to. It can really help them cope. So what I'll do in a situation like that is when they're in a group, I'll say, listen, if you have the following problem, you feel you are powerless to change the situation or to fix the situation or to learn, introspect enough to be strong enough, whatever it is that I saw that they need. I'll say, if you are in this room and you feel that way, my recommendation is to go see a therapist. And I kind of give it in a general thing, because if you pinpoint somebody, it can be hard. There will be times when you're like, I'm sorry, you've got to get yourself, I'm, telling you right now, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to sit there for an hour, to facilitate, make sure there's no Lashon Hara. And if you see somebody, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, he took the little lamb over his shoulders and brought them. If you see somebody you can help, that's beautiful. You will be the first line of defense in this. But again, that's not your accountability or your responsibility. It's a great question. Okay. Some of the facilitators actually are teachers in Beis Yaakov, and they're hoping to bring it to their classes. So definitely, if somebody's married and they can do the homework, whatever the homework is that is assigned for that week. If they're not married, so they miss out on the homework. So what that means is that they, instead of getting 100% of the value of the book, they're getting 90% of the value of the book. 90% of our Masorah, our traditions, is better than nothing. And also, it also allows them to know, what is a wife? What is Chazal? What is our sources for what a wife is? It's very upside down. I don't know if you talk to any of the young women, or even any age, whatever. It's very upside down what the role of a wife is, what a wife is, what, and I'm not saying we need to know the role of a wife so that we can do the good thing and be the right person. We need to know the role of a wife so that we can have the maximum satisfaction and the maximum pleasure and joy in our life. That's why we want to know what the role is. What does our Masorah teach us to do? And by knowing that, we have a level of satisfaction that's not available otherwise. What Rebbetzin Kamenetsky said is, she said, the facilitator's main job is to make sure there's no gossip. There's no Lashon Hara in that room. Your idea, which is fantastic, and this is what I do in my own classes, is I hand out an index card. Now on Shabbos you can't do this, but I hand out an index card and they fill in their questions. Now, the issue is the questions, every person in that room, let's say there's 7 people, if one person hands it in, everybody knows who answered the question. If 2 people answered it, they can still figure out who by process of elimination. So if you're going to do that, you have to have, everybody has to be handed an index card. Some people write a question and other people say, have a nice day, thank you for the lovely class, whatever this, and you fold in, and if there's 7 people in the room, 7 index cards come back, 5 of them are empty, and 2 of them you read the question. Now, in the beginning, the facilitator isn't really the address for questions such as, what do I do? My husband doesn't give me enough attention, right? That's covered. You'll get to and if they get to it, you say, we'll get to that section. When we get to that section, it'll go over it very, very thoroughly how to answer that. Unless the person has read the book 10 times and watched on www.ladiestalkshow.com, there's a lot of videos in there. So if a person has seen a lot of the videos and read the book several times and whatever, and they feel comfortable answering it, that's fine. But they don't have to feel obligated to answer that. They can say, we are going to get to that in this book, probably. For them to be asking that kind of a question, you could be, as a facilitator, the go-between between a rabbi and the person. So the person feels uncomfortable. Maybe their husband works for the rabbi, or learns with a rabbi, or sits at the same table in shul with a rabbi, and so they don't feel comfortable asking that question. You can go and say, here's the issue. How would you handle that? And you can come back the next week. So, okay, this is the Ladies Talk Show. This is the Facilitator training. This is your host, Leah Richeimer. Thank you very much for joining us.